You're reading the story of a woman who gave up everything, her dreamy little home, my freedom, and even some of my dignity, to safeguard the legacy that wasn't just built with bricks and mortar, but with every moment of my childhood. Our family hotel wasn't just a business, it was the very nucleus of our family. From the distant echoes of clinking dishes during breakfast service to the comforting scent of fresh linen in the hallways, it was alive with memories and potential, and for the longest time, that potential rested on my shoulders. Now, here I am, sitting in this heavily paneled meeting room, choking on disappointment and betrayal like a fishbone lodged in my throat. This place, which once felt like home, now felt less familiar than a stranger's house. Across from me sits my brother Ben with his polished armor of confidence, oozing the kind of smug satisfaction that dripped like poison into the undercurrents of our family dynamics. It was in the tight-lipped smirk he'd wear when he'd outmaneuver someone in an argument, or the dismissive wave of his hand when he'd forego emotional intelligence altogether. I mean, the man couldn't locate empathy on a map, and yet here he was, allegedly, the natural choice. My parents were seated at the head of the table, stoic but seemingly unified in their ignorance of the dagger now protruding from my back. When my mother uttered the words, "Victoria, he's the natural choice," it was as if the air had been displaced, leaving me gasping in an oxygenless void. Those words, so easily spoken, felt like an erasure of 1,000 nights I'd worked the reception, the weekends teaching hospitality classes to the new recruits, and the sacrifices that had etched themselves into the lines on my face. All that remained was silence, acrid and unforgiving. As Ben gathered papers into a neatly ostentatious stack, his satisfaction hung heavier in the air than the summer heat. He was the golden child, the favorite, the treasured son bestowed upon this earth to hold the keys to every metaphorical kingdom while my own were left rusting and forgotten. Inside this meeting room, where old family portraits lined the walls like a witness to personal histories, I stayed quiet. But, I had learned some things are better left unsaid in the moment. If there's one virtue I've mastered, it's playing the long game. You see, once, when my world had been filled with the patter of polite applause and whispered words of promise, I had made a call, and this call would be the Virgil to my Dante, guiding me through this inferno my family had constructed around me. Every empire tends toward obliteration when built on unstable ground. They hadn't realized the foundations they were eroding. For now, I feigned ignorance, clutched my poker face like a lifeline, and exuded a composure that felt foreign yet comfortably necessary. They looked at me as if I was the supportive sister, all smiles and unconditional loyalty, absorbing this divisive choice like a saint before a firing squad. Little did they know, I had already begun setting the dominoes in motion, cascading towards a revelation that would illuminate every hidden alcove of deception they had comfortably inhabited. But all in due time. After the meeting, I walked out of that room with an icy calmness, my skin feeling like porcelain cracking over a simmering cauldron of emotions. The drive home was a blur, the familiar roads twisting through my windshield as if they, too, couldn't comprehend this unexpected betrayal. Ben, the golden child whose only accomplishment seemed to be his birthright, was now steering this legacy, a decision as sound as putting a fox in charge of the henhouse. At home, I kicked off my shoes, my sanctuary unraveling into a maelstrom of thoughts. It was eerily quiet, save for the hum of the fridge and the rustling leaves partnering with the summer breeze outside my window. Each memory here seemed to whisper, "You've been wronged." The weight of the sacrifices I'd made pressed heavily against my chest. It wasn't just about the hotel. This was about years of being the dependable one, the sister who was supposed to make up for Ben's shortcomings, voluntarily wearing the invisible cloak of responsibility while he escaped consequence like Houdini. I reached for my phone, fingers lingering over a contact labeled Plan B, a file stashed with insurance ignoring vague intentions, labeled with intent and precision. Months prior, in a moment full of desperation or uncanny intuition, I had reached out to a forensic accountant and an old college friend who survived the shark-infested waters of corporate sabotage. They knew numbers, and people, could tell stories they often didn't want revealing. I had given them names, dates, anomalous expenditures, and now their findings were crystallizing into a damning orchestration. I called Lisa first, my accountant ally with a mind as sharp as a tack and a penchant for finding skeletons in the most discreet closets. The familiarity of her voice came through, carrying a sense of urgency, like the clicking of a safe's lock just before it opened. "Victoria, I've been digging," she said, her voice laced with caution as though fearing the weight of her revelations might fracture my resolve. "You're not going to like what I've found." She shared a tale of diverted funds and duplicate invoices, enough red flags to decorate a festival. It was as if someone was siphoning the vitality of our family legacy into an abyss shrouded in Ben's arrogance. Each word was a pebble in my growing avalanche of determination. The next call was to Marcus, my loyal friend who knew the art of persuasion and infiltration like none other. "Look, Vicky," he began, living up to his penchant for blunt truth. "The rabbit hole goes deeper. Your brother isn't just incompetent, he's dirty." There it was, the dagger's edge, finally gleaming in the stark light. Marcus explained how he'd posed as a potential investor in some of Ben's backdoor dealings. The details, the transfers, the side meetings, laid bare Ben's self-destructive path towards saturation and rot. "Victoria," he added, his tone softening, lifting the weight ever so slightly. "You've got this. Just say the word." Fueled by a medley of anger and an adrenaline-infused resolve, I methodically plotted out my course. Confronting Ben openly wouldn't do, no, exposing him required careful choreography. In this next act of familial theatrics, I'd draw the final curtain, and the applause wouldn't be for him. With each piece of new intelligence, my resolve hardened into unbreakable steel. My family may have unwittingly crowned a usurper, but I was the sovereign strategist. As the sun set outside my window, painting gold on the horizon, I felt a twinge of poetic justice. They might have handed him the keys to the kingdom, but I held the detonator. The stage was set for the reckoning, and I was ready to orchestrate the downfall from the shadows they forced me into. With calculated patience, I prepared for the confrontation, a convergence where I would hold the reins of justice. In this game of high stakes and emotional trench warfare, only one could emerge unscathed. And this time, it wouldn't be the sibling whose victories were unearned and hollow. The countdown had begun. The next morning, I rose with the kind of clarity that comes after a storm has raged through your life, leaving only the truth behind. The briefest flickers of doubt were vanquished by a newfound fury. I wasn't just standing up for myself, I was standing up for the essence of our family, the history embedded within the walls of that hotel. The past might have been etched in shadow, but I was determined to illuminate the future. I decided to start my day with a ritual visit to the hotel, acting the part of the dutiful daughter, the supportive sister who graciously accepted the burden of the familial cross. The lobby was buzzing with its usual cadence, guests checking in, consultants scribbling notes, the concierge weaving through requests like a maestro. This symphony of motion was mine, they just didn't know it yet. Walking into Ben's makeshift office, the small talk was suffocating. His endless prattle about projected growth and strategic branding initiatives was about as genuine as a Chinese knockoff. But today, I had smiles and empty nods to complement his monologue, as I gathered more breadcrumbs for the trail of revelations that awaited. Meeting after meeting, I soaked in every single word, committing to memory the cadence of deceit layered within his plans for expansion, plans that hadn't been reviewed, negotiated, or approved but were set into motion under an overconfident presumption. Ben was blazing a path with the reckless abandon of someone who doesn't know when to put out the fire, and it gave me everything I needed to finalize the evidence trail. After my reconnaissance wrapped up, I texted Lisa and Marcus, "Meeting set. Want to stop by and review?" Deploying coded language and location specifics only they would understand. We were plotting a family gathering under the guise of celebratory decorum, a ripple beneath the unbroken surface of established expectations. Before sunset, I was dressed in conviction, a sheath dress that communicated fortitude, my expression revealing nothing more than composed determination. The family dining room at the hotel had been redecorated for the occasion, every detail meticulously arranged with the tactful precision I applied to my life's secrets. The ambient lighting cast dramatic shadows around the pristine table set for far more than the 4 family members occupying this fateful space. As the evening unfolded, the polite exchanges running dry by dessert, I stood up, clinking my glass lightly. Perhaps we could make a toast, I suggested, like I was inviting Satan to Sunday service. My voice was an unwavering poker face, delivering conviction far richer than its superficial sweetness. I raised my glass, shimmering with reflections from the chandelier above, and began, to family, to legacy, and transparency. There was a hitch in Ben's breath. I saw him glance at his phone, possibly part of his habitual reliance on diversions, a vast directory of excuses. Our parents watched, oblivious to the tightening grip of fate unraveling around the dinner table. "Ben," I said with an invitation that seemed like a velvet glove masking an iron fist, "there are things we need to discuss. For the good of this shared dream we've nurtured." To Mark Twain's eternal relevance, truth is stranger than fiction, but it is because fiction is obliged to stick to possibilities, truth isn't. And today, I was about to unleash an unassuming truth with the visceral shock of fiction. This toast, a prelude to truth-slinging, unveiled a meticulously plotted ambush beneath the veneer of familial celebration, was calibrated to take Ben by surprise. We were on the precipice of the crescendo where reality would shed its skin to reveal the spectacle of justice. Victory no longer belonged to the swiftest nor the strongest, but to the one who could hold back long enough to emerge victorious in daylight rather than stumble prematurely into shadowed defeat. Ben, oblivious to the meticulous barbs layered in my words, chuckled nervously. "Ah, yes, family responsibility keeps us on our toes, doesn't it?" Little did he know, the ground was slipping away beneath him like a hastily pulled rug. What he didn't realize was, this amateur magician's tricks were about to be dismantled in front of the audience. Pasts were prologue, and tonight, we were rewriting the history anchored too long in duplicity. The stage was set, and while Ben remained wrapped in the illusory safety of his own narratives, the rest of us knew better. With the flick of my wrist, our parents sunk back into their chairs, glassy-eyed and unaware of the curtain about to rise on this intricate plot. They had no idea what was coming. Innocence, or perhaps naivete, had shielded them from the squall that was Ben's ambition. "Ben, I've invited a few friends to join us," I continued, steady and unwavering. "They have some insights into your, shall we say, creative accounting techniques." The room's temperature seemed to plummet, though the air remained intolerably still as I gestured toward Marcus and Lisa stepping subtly into the room, a duo harbingers of revelation clad in casual confidence. The confusion on Ben's face would have been comic if the stakes weren't so high. "Victoria, what is this?" he blustered, his swagger evaporating like morning mist under the relentless sun. For someone who prided himself on his calculated detachment, Ben's expression slipped alarmingly close to panic, a delicious irony given his earlier display of bravado. Lisa, the consummate professional, was direct and aimed her words expertly. "Ben," she said without a trace of malice, "we've been following some irregularities in the hotel's financials." Victoria thought it best to address these issues before they snowball into something unmanageable. Each word was a strike on the drum of tension quivering in the room. Our parents, faces tinted with disbelief, shifted from surprise to a haze of confusion, attempting to process this unfolding confrontation, believing and yet disbelieving, as if our entire family history had been rewritten in a breath. Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, poised as the conversational hitman. "Everyone likes a side hustle," he began, disarming the moment with his wry humor, "but diverting company resources? That's ambitious, even for you, Ben." His grin was that of a wolf with supremacy in sight. I almost pitted Ben, not quite, but almost. Ben sputtered for something to grasp, his eyes darting in a desperate scramble for solid ground. "This is ridiculous," he exclaimed, his voice sliding into a note of hysteria. "I don't know what you think you've found, but it's either fabricated or out of context." "Ben," I cut in, my tone as firm as steel cloaked in diplomacy, "the numbers don't lie. What you've done here could jeopardize everything we've worked for, our legacy, unless we confront it together and quickly." His face fell, no longer able to arrange it into the usual facade of smug assurance. His desperation was palpable as his narrative of control slipped through his fingers. "Vicky, you can't do this," he pleaded, attempting to mine a vein of old loyalty. "You're my sister. We should handle this ourselves, without outsiders." A desperate suggestion, exposed in the naked light of looming catastrophe. But any affinity he once had was eroded by years of manipulation, only to find hollow roots. I wasn't doing this to him, I was doing this for my family, for myself. Ben, I said with a quiet triumph, leaning forward as if revealing a well-kept secret, the real problem is that you never saw me watching. The room tightened with a suspense nearly electric, binding us in a visceral moment. A kaleidoscope of feelings illuminated his face as the levees broke, awareness dawning in time with the realization of loss. Lisa pushed a folder across the table filled with evidence, a Pandora's box of carefully collected data that marked the roadmap to his unethical transgressions. Here's everything. It's clear, undeniable. Her words were a sentence, each syllable carrying the weight of the inevitable. The confrontation, the climax of this familial unraveling, was colorful with revelations and honesty, mezzo forte to Ben's undoing and pianissimo to the symphony of justice I conducted with precision. In that instant, every suspicion and secret boiled to the surface, where darkness met the cleansing purity of the unwelcome light. I stood back, the observer no longer, but rather the author and narrator of this new chapter, a page-turner where retribution was served not with malice, but with the inevitable justice shaped into being by the integrity Ben had so long ignored. The play had reached its crescendo, the cards were laid bare, and the truth alone wore the crown. With the last flickers of the evening dimming the room, I felt a sense of liberation. As the night settled in, Ben's kingdom of cards was kissed by collapse, leaving me in the comforting aftermath of reclaimed control. The aftermath of our confrontation lingered in the room, a potent concoction of disbelief, anger, and the creeping chill of justice served. Ben sat silently, colors draining from his face, each wave of realization breaking over him with renewed vigor. My parents were a study in shock, eyes darting between their children like spectators at a match they never anticipated attending. The silence was punctuated by the slow tick of the antique clock, a metronome counting down to reckoning. For Ben, time was no longer an ally, but a reminder of the inevitability hurtling toward him like an unstoppable train. I allowed the silence to settle, a thick blanket under which clarity could emerge for my parents, because this wasn't just about Ben and me anymore. It was about what we all stood to lose if his duplicity went unchallenged. The hotel, our legacy, was teetering on the brink, and without swift, decisive action, it would swallow us all whole. I never wanted it to come to this, I said softly, looking directly at my parents, whose confusion was rapidly splintering into hurt. I've spent years watching the hotel grow, nurturing it, while watching certain parts of our family fray at the seams. This isn't just about the money. It's about integrity, ours as a family. My father, usually the picture of storytelling and humor, wore an expression of aged weariness as the weight of Ben's misdeeds sank in. "Why didn't you come to us, Victoria?" he asked, his voice cracked but devoid of blame, a stark contrast to the anger he must have felt. I paused, gathering my words with meticulous care, knowing each syllable needed to convey both love and resolve. "Because this wasn't just a family matter, it was business," I replied softly, eyes unwavering. "And we needed to make sure it didn't crumble under the weight of hidden truths no one wanted to face." Ben, finally rousing himself from his stupor, interjected with renewed frustration. "This is a witch hunt, Vicky. You can't destroy me over spreadsheets." His defense was cliched, yet the desperation in his voice added an almost tragic color to the scene. A small part of me, the part that remembered childhood afternoons spent building sandcastles with him, did not want to see him suffer. But that compassion was overshadowed by necessity, the necessity to protect our shared dream from decay. "Ben," I said, letting an edge enter my voice, "it's not just spreadsheets. It's deception. You've been using the hotel, our hotel, as your personal ATM. You've turned what was meant to be our future into your personal bargaining chip, and it ends here." The room brimmed with a tangible tension, the echoes of broken trust reminding everyone that this familial saga had reached a terrifying crescendo. Parents who once mediated children's squabbles now sat as reluctant jurors in a trial where innocence had already fled. Marcus leaned slightly forward, keeping his words balanced. "Ben, these financial discrepancies aren't the kind you just brush off. If this continues public, we're talking legal consequences, rehabilitation, restitution. This is serious. Marcus delivered his words like a careful physician diagnosing a terminal disorder, objectively, yet with pointed intent. There was no malice, just an urgent call to recognize what everyone else already had. The urgency of the room transformed into a cloak of inevitability as Ben looked around, realizing his realm was plunging into irrevocable collapse. Resignedly, his shoulders slumped, eyes diverting to a distant memory only he could see. The collapse of defenses was almost audible, the recognition of defeat settling into the lines of his expression as he accepted this mirror turned unrepentantly toward him. My mother, silent until then, reached over and the simplest act, her hand laying gently atop mine, whispered her support in a way words never could. Her eyes carried the lament of a parent grappling with the fracturing of her world yet grounded in the unwavering strength needed to see it rebuilt. Ben finally spoke, the flicker of fight extinguished. "All right," he whispered, a surrender wrapped in quiet sorrow. Reality was setting in, and with it, a path toward possible redemption, but only if he chose to walk it. The tension in the room began to loosen its grip, leaving behind the story of a family striving to transform betrayal into rebirth. As Marcus and Lisa rose to leave, taking with them the shadows of revelations that changed the course of our lives, I realized that while Ben's chapter might close with turbulence, mine was opening to a clearing sky and a landscape brimming with possibilities. What remained unsaid among us, etched within air, slowly lifting from our collective shoulders, was the silent vow toward redemption and revival. The tale was not yet fully told, and with each member finally aligned toward a shared path, hope began its patient return. The time to rebuild was upon us, and the seeds of our legacy awaited the birth of a new chapter, and I was ready to lead the way. The days that followed were a mosaic of change, peppered with moments of healing and renewed purpose. The revelations we'd faced as a family created a new kind of equilibrium, fragile, but laced with an undeniable resilience. Our family meetings transformed from tense gatherings into collaborative efforts focused on the hotel's stability and, more importantly, amending trust. After the dust settled, my father called a family meeting, an opportunity for everyone to voice their hopes, fears, and plans for our communal future. The uncertainty had dissolved, replaced by an unspoken agreement to curate this legacy with care and mutual respect. Ben, bruised but introspective, began discussing options for restitution, acknowledging his mistakes with a humility I hadn't witnessed since we were mere children trying to decide who was better at hide and seek. He committed to transparency, and while trust would take time to rebuild, the first steps toward reconciliation were clear. In a surprising turn, my parents requested that I join them in formally restructuring the hotel's management. This wasn't just an olive branch, it was a testament to their recognition of the effort and foresight I'd maintained for years. As the new co-CEO alongside my father, my role cemented the once tenuous peace into an optimistic partnership, peaked with the promises of shared ambitions rather than divergent paths. We spent long afternoons in the boardroom, strategizing and crafting our vision for the hotel, input from each family member valued and honored. The atmosphere crackled with fresh ideas and reinvigorated determination, as we began rebranding initiatives and courting new partnerships that mirrored our renewed integrity. Lisa and Marcus remained involved, offering guidance through the transition, acting as trusted advisors, and at times the voices of conscience, when we grappled with the emotional remnants of Ben's choices. Their presence fortified the bridge of trust we were building anew, ensuring we never veered off course again. The hotel itself seemed to respond to the new energy, its old bones reinvigorated with the lifeblood of collective hope whispered through its corridors. Our guests continued to stay, their experiences enriched by the newfound unity behind the reception desk, a legacy no longer burdened by secrecy, but flourishing with the promise of opportunity. One evening, with the hotel finally quiet, I found myself standing on the balcony overlooking our beloved establishment. The night air was thick with the fragrance of jasmine, stars reflecting off the gently swaying trees, a reminder that the cycles of nature mirrored our own journey of rediscovery. Ben joined me, the once tangible wall between us replaced with the tentative promise of renewed sibling kinship. "Victoria," he began, his voice grounded with sincerity, "I've learned more about family in these months than I did in all the years before. I met his gaze, acknowledging the challenging road we both traveled to reach this newfound understanding. We all have, Ben, I replied, allowing the night to absorb the gravity of our silent accord. As I looked out over the grounds, bathed in moonlight, I felt the familiar stirrings of gratitude mingling with optimism. Our family legacy was no longer a weight anchored by unspoken secrets, but a tapestry woven with threads of experience, forgiveness, and hope, and I was finally at the helm, navigating not just for myself, but for all of us. The chapters written in shadows had passed, and beneath the awakening dawn stretched an unwritten story brimming with the light of possibility. It was the promise of a new beginning, punctuated by the promise of what we could achieve together, the ghosts of the past lending strength rather than hindrance to our newly forged family bond. The road ahead was luminous with promise, and as the torchbearer of our revitalized family dream, I knew with certainty that the most challenging days were behind us. Our future awaited, eternal and open, crafted by its architects, the best it could ever hope to be. We were ready to embrace it.